So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how to be an effective teacher educator. And I'm actually, as Mohammed said, I work at Arizona State University, and I work at Global Launch, which is our global training unit for English language students and professionals. So I'll get started. And this is what I would like to cover today with you. So the first thing is I'd like to define what teacher educators actually are, describe how teacher educators support teachers, and examine the continuing professional development framework, which actually comes from the British Council Teaching English, and look at the areas within that framework, which are knowledge, skills, and approaches to development. So to start, I would actually like to start with, hold on, it's going to let me.
Yeah, the poll, right?
Yes, the poll, if I can get to the next slide.
Yeah, guys, I've dropped a link in the chat box. Please go to this link and participate in this poll by answering the question. So, yeah.
Right, so this poll is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mohammed, because you can see it, actually. I can't see it.
Yeah. So the question is, what is your current role? So are you a teacher, educator, trainer? Are you a language teacher or instructor? Are you a subject area teacher, instructor? Are you an instructional designer? Or are you a student teacher or pre-service teacher? So we're waiting for your answers. Okay, so we have 40% of the people here are teacher trainers. We have 20% of the people here are language instructors, and 40% are student teachers or pre-service teachers.
Okay, great.
So maybe so half of the people here are teacher trainers. Maybe.
Okay, great. So then I wanted to tell you, and I know Mohammed has already given me a nice introduction, but I wanted to tell you, hold on,
yeah.
if it'll let me, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty with the, okay. So what my roles are at my job at ASU. And so I would say I am maybe not a student teacher, but I'm definitely a student, because I'm always learning from my students, from my colleagues, from what I'm reading, from what I'm researching. I feel like I'm always learning, right? And I'm sure that you experience the same thing as I do. And of course, I'm a teacher. I've primarily taught in intensive English programs around the world, so university-age students, but I've also taught secondary students, so middle school and high school as well. And I'm an instructional designer. I started that a couple of years ago. And, I've designed a lot of online courses. And actually, that's how I met Mohammed was I had designed some courses for the open program, or you might know it as the AE teacher program. And he was one of my students. And so I've had the opportunity to be a teacher educator through that program online, but I've also been a teacher educator or trainer in on-ground programs here at ASU. So these have been my primary roles. And so now I'd like to actually think about our confidence. This is a confidence thermometer. And I would like you to answer this question. So how confident do we feel about how to be more effective, a more effective teacher educator? So if you think, I need a bit of help, could you please write in the chat green? If you feel somewhat confident, could you please write yellow in the chat? And if you feel very confident or just confident, please write red in the chat. So far I'm seeing green, some red. Green, yellow. Okay, so it looks like we have a range of green, yellow, and red. So it's great that we have a variety here. So hopefully this webinar will actually, just raise the confidence a little bit. And of course, those of you who are red, I would welcome any comments you have, perhaps in the chat or at the end when we have the Q&A session. So, oops. So let's look now at what teacher educators are. And so I took this definition from the British Council Teaching English website, and they define teacher educators thus. Teacher educators support the professional development of prospective and practicing teachers. So obviously we're talking about both pre-service and in-service teachers. And what we can focus on is the word support. So that's what I'd like to take a look at now. What does it mean by support? How do we support the professional development of prospective and practicing teachers? And so I know some of you said you're not teacher educators, but I have a feeling that maybe perhaps after this next activity, you might think of yourself more as a teacher educator. So let's look at the next activity. And this is, this is actually a Jamboard. So if you could scan this QR code with your phones, and we're going to be looking at slides 1 and 2. And if you, if you have difficulty with that, I can give you in the chat the link. Sorry, let me just stop sharing for 1 second. I'm having difficulty.
I think it's better to drop the link in the chat box because some people might be here, through their cell phones. So it might be, a little bit difficult to get.
Yeah, okay, so sorry about that. Always technology issues, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But here, I'll put this in the chat as well, just so that everyone has that. So, and then please scan the QR code. I'll give you a second to do that. Has everyone been able to scan this? Hopefully. So in the Jamboard, the question I put there is, as teacher educators, how do we support the professional development of prospective and practicing teachers? So I want you to think about what you do to support other teachers or prospective teachers. So for example, providing in-person or online PD workshops to teachers. That's an example, and that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing right now. So this is one way I can support teachers. So if you haven't used Jamboard before, please go here to the sticky note and click on that right in the sticky note and then save it. So if you can't think of anything, think also too of perhaps you mentor other teachers, right? Or perhaps you share your findings from a conference. So any of those things can be a support. Maybe just 1 more minute. Okay, so we can see some of them already on the Jamboard. These are great. So providing teachers with support and feedback, modeling at workshops, cascading any training to my colleagues via Zoom or face-to-face, conducting needs analysis through class visits to design based on the needs and next steps, building their self-confidence, modeling, sharing my classroom stories, peer observation, workshops about improving confidence. These are great. Providing teachers with blog posts about different areas of interest. So there are many ways that we can support teachers. So now I'd like to take a look actually at some of the ones that I do. So here are some of the ones that I do. I, of course, as I said, provide, in-person or online PD workshops like this one. I give in-person and online PD courses and programs as well. I mentor new teachers in my department, and I would imagine quite a few of you might do that, right? Mentoring new teachers. I guide teachers in the promotion process. The promotion process at ASU is quite complicated, so I have helped to facilitate the promotion process for teachers that are applying. I share findings from conferences or workshops attended, whether informally, like just talking to a colleague, right? Or formally, for example, at a workshop, I might present what I found or what I heard. I observe teachers and give feedback. And I've chaired committees, I've also been a member of committees that have focused on professional development. And maybe some of you have committees like this at your workplace. And I engage in action research that's focused on teacher education. And actually, the most recent action research that I've engaged in has been focused on teacher identity and teacher educator identity. And that's really been fascinating. And I think it's helped me a lot to grow as a professional. So these are just some of the ways that I support professional development. So now I'd like to turn to the continuing professional development framework. And as I said, this comes from the British Council, Teaching English. And they've divided it up into 3 areas. So the first one is knowledge. So what teacher educators need to know. The second one, skills. So what abilities teacher educators need to have. So what should they be able to do? And then finally, the approaches to development, which focuses on pursuing professional development opportunities, as well as contributing to the profession. So we're going to take a look at these 3 areas in much more detail. So the first one, again, as I said, is knowledge. And I've adapted somewhat the framework for the purpose of this webinar, and also just to reflect who I am as a teacher educator. So the first one is knowledge. And the first is obviously knowing the topic or the subject of the professional development opportunity. And what does it mean to know the topic or subject? So if you think about it, we need to have knowledge regarding, for example, teaching methods, assessment, the learning process, how our students learn. We also need to be up to date, I think, on the research. So we need to know the research that's out there on this subject. And we also need to know what resources are available so that we can point participants or the teachers to those resources so that they can access more information. So that's part of what knowing the topic or subject is for me. The next is what I call the PAC. So knowing the purpose, audience, and context. So knowing the purpose, right? Why are we doing this, for example, this training, this professional development opportunity? Why have I been asked to do it? So knowing that purpose, of course, knowing your audience, right? So the teachers. So what are their qualifications? What is their experience, their motivation? What are their interests? And most importantly, what are their needs? So that's all to do with the audience. And then, of course, the context, right? So what is the social cultural context? What is the educational system like? What are some of the supports and the hindrances to the teachers learning from their context? So keeping in mind the purpose, audience, and context is very important. And of course, one way you can find out much more about the purpose, audience, and context, and I think somebody mentioned this in the Jamboard, is to run a needs analysis, right? You can send out, and it can be a very simple one. It can be one that you send out through a Google form, and you ask questions about the purpose, audience, and context. The next is to know the teaching and learning process for adult professionals. So it's good to keep in mind, right, that when you're actually giving, for example, a training or a program, as a teacher educator, you're dealing with professionals and you're not dealing with your 15-year-old student anymore. So you have to keep that in mind. So you need to know the competencies that teachers need to have in order to be successful practitioners. You need to understand, I think, key theories of adult learning. You need to be aware of teachers' attitudes, beliefs, motivations. And you also need to be able to, I think, know how to overcome barriers to effective professional learning. And then finally, you need to know who you are as a teacher educator. So when I come to something like this, I'm not coming as a blank slate, right? I am bringing all my experience, my qualifications, the good, the bad, and the ugly to the experience. I'm bringing my values and my education and so on. So knowing who you are as a teacher educator, knowing your identity is really important. So I'd like to actually focus on this because this is, as I mentioned before, has been part of my action research that I've been involved in the last year or so. And so to do that, I'd like to actually do an activity with you. If it's going to let me. Okay, so this activity is actually called 3 words, and it's to look at who you are as a teacher educator. But since some of you had said you're not a teacher educator yet, or you don't feel like you are, please feel free to do this as a teacher. But I'd like you to think about 3 words that actually describe yourself as a teacher educator. So when I thought about this, and maybe this also describes me as a teacher as well, I came up with 3 words. And the 3 words that I came up with were, I'm creative. So I feel like I really enjoy coming up with, for example, different activities for us to engage in when I'm teaching. I also really, I think I try to bring creative solutions to some of the problems that come up in the training, for example. And so I feel that I am a creative teacher educator. I'm also curious. I do really want to know more. I want to know more about our field. I want to know more about other teachers. I want to know more about other contexts, because I think all of that can make me a better teacher educator. And I also think that I'm approachable, that, I feel that teachers can come to me and talk to me, and we can discuss issues and collaborate to come up with solutions. So these are just 3 words to help describe me as a teacher educator. And I hope you can understand better who I am as a teacher educator, even just through these 3 words. So now let's try together. So I would like you to think of 3 words to describe yourself as a teacher educator or as a teacher, and that's fine. And why have you chosen those words? So it's kind of like just what I did. And if you'd like, you could share those 3 words in the chat. So I'll just give you a few minutes to think about the 3 words, decide why you've chosen them, and then if you would like to drop them in the chat. These are great. We've already put, and Ron, I love yours, seasoned, spicy, and sassy. Okay. But we've got reachable, no threat, updated and knowledgeable, passionate, ambitious, hardworking, supportive, kind, knowledgeable, curious, passionate, caring, motivated, honest, resourceful, and passionate, approachable, creative, and curious, collaborative, curious, and creative, active, hardworking, and patient, lifelong learner, creative, passionate, energetic. That's great. Yeah, we definitely need energy, right? So these are great. Curious, lifelong learner, a collaborative helper. So all of these words, right, we can describe ourselves. And I think knowing more about yourself, who you are as a teacher educator, can really make a difference when you're in the classroom or when you're in a professional development opportunity. And if you're interested, please, in the future, do not hesitate to reach out to me, because there are many more activities that are like this that really help you to focus in on who you are as a teacher or as a teacher educator. But just in the interest of time, we're going to actually continue. And now we're going to be actually focusing on skills, or the abilities you need in order to be a successful teacher educator. So the first, obviously, is planning. And I think a lot of these are going to seem similar if you're a teacher. You need to be able to plan. So remember, we were talking about that needs analysis. So you can bring that needs analysis in to inform how you plan that professional development opportunity. But you need to be able to create SMART objectives. You need to be able to include materials that will help to convey the information well. You need to plan interactive activities. And you need to also, of course, include assessments, how you're going to assess, when you're going to assess. And all of this needs to be organized into a coherent, logical plan, okay? Just like when we teach. The next is your ability to deliver content in a meaningful way. And of course, I think one of the big parts of this is you need to be able to communicate clearly the content. And you need to use, I think, within that communication, you need to use a range of participant-centered and interactive strategies, because, I think I found, especially with adult professionals, that's what they want. They want to be involved. They want to be in participant-centered trainings, for example. And you need to integrate technology, right? Technology is definitely here to stay, and it's important to integrate it into your delivery. And you need to, of course, manage and monitor. And the last is model. I think this is one of the most important things about delivering, for example, a professional development opportunity. You are the model, right? When the teachers are there looking at you, watching you, maybe, hopefully, if you've done it well, they're going to take some of your strategies, some of your ideas, and use them in their classrooms. So you are a model for them. And so delivering a well-organized, well-planned, interactive professional development opportunity is very important. So, of course, you need to be able to evaluate the participants well. So there can be a variety of ways you can evaluate the adult professionals that you're engaged with. That could be through observation. It could be through student feedback, your feedback. It could be through self-assessment. When I'm engaged in this, I do a lot of reflection. And the biggest thing I think to keep in mind when you're evaluating, especially these adult professionals, is that it needs to be transparent and fair. If it's not, you'll definitely hear about it from them. So, and of course, you need to be able to reflect on the professional development. What I mean by this is you need to be able to look at what you've just done, for example, and say, hey, what were some of the strengths of this professional development opportunity? What did I do well? What did the participants do well? And then you also need to look on the other side of the coin. So you need to say, okay, what were some of the challenges that we face? What were some of the issues? How can I solve those issues for the next time? So being able to reflect on that is very important. And finally, I think one of the most important and one of the most challenging skills is the ability to sustain the engagement. So what I mean by that is being able to make sure that the participants use what they gain from the professional development opportunity beyond that opportunity itself. So I was just thinking about this the other day because I have just come back from TESOL International in Oregon. And I heard so many great ideas, from many different presenters. But I know now that I'm probably maybe going to use one idea or two ideas, and that's about it, right? Because I don't have a clear plan on how to sustain the engagement beyond the TESOL convention. And so you as teacher educators, you have the onus or the responsibility to make sure that participants have a clear plan on how to sustain engagement. So to help us to look at this last, more challenging skill, I'd like to, sorry, I'm having technology issues. I'd actually like to go back to the Jamboard. And if you could, again, scan the QR code, or perhaps you already have it open. And we're actually going to go to slide 3 on the Jamboard. And I can, again, drop in the chat the link as well, if that's needed. And so if you could scan this again and go to slide 3. And on slide 3, so you just need to click up here if you need to get to the next slide. I want you to look at this question and try to answer it. So the question is, what activities will help teachers to sustain engagement with the professional development? So one way to do this that I've done before is to develop an action plan with clear steps on how the teachers will sustain the professional development. And so I'd like you to try to come up with different ideas about how you could possibly help teachers to sustain the engagement. Or perhaps you already do this yourself as a teacher, so you could write that idea as well. I'll give you a few minutes to do this. Okay, great. It looks like we've got some great ideas here. And so we have things like instructional coaching, right, when possible, offering a variety of professional development formats and modalities, workshops, courses, certificates, conferences, online learning. That's great. Zoom follow-ups. Yep, so getting chances to apply what they've learned with real students and getting feedback. Scheduling semi-formal interviews to discuss challenges and achievements later on. Yes, through reflection and feedback. Giving teachers options to courses and giving them autonomy of choice upon their personal needs and preferences. Joining a teacher community or fellow educators like Ron and Mose on Facebook. Yes, that's definitely one great way to sustain engagement. Join EduCast. Yes, very much so. Quizzes maybe afterward. Right, so there are many different ways. These are great, thank you. And I just wanted to share now some of the ways that I have done so. And so again, developing that action plan, connecting more through social media. So I am not a huge fan of social media, but I do recognize its power, right? Through Facebook, LinkedIn, everything that EduCast is actually doing, all that is definitely connecting, helping to connect and to sustain engagement. Continuing learning through study groups, whether that's, more like formal, like professional learning communities, or even just in your workplace, right? So if you go to a conference, you learn about assessment, then maybe you set up a study group, right, in your department, and you continue your learning that way. Engaging in action research together, I think this is a very powerful tool as well in order to sustain the engagement. So as if you go to a training on assessment, and then you decide you want to engage in action research about assessment with your colleagues, that's a great way to continue the engagement. Form groups to examine student work, which I think probably a lot of places do this, and create and attend mini conferences on that topic. So these are some ways that you can sustain professional development as well as the ideas you had on the Jamboard. And again, it depends on your context. It depends on your teachers. Sorry, this is just very temperamental. Okay, so we're going to look at the last part of the adapted continuing professional development framework, which is approaches to development. And these two are based on developing yourself professionally and developing the profession. So the first one is engaging in pursuing professional development opportunities, which is what you're doing right now, actually. And then the second one is contributing to the profession. And this, of course, I think we already do this, right? We do this even if it's just at the micro level, right? Just mentoring other teachers, or it could be even at the more of a macro level, in the sense of maybe you're engaging in research and then you publish that research. And so all of these, it runs the gamut in terms of contributing to the profession, but all of them do contribute to the profession. So what I'd like to do is, I know we're getting close on time, but what I'd like to do is have you share in the chat one example of how you have contributed to the profession. So if you take a few minutes, think about that and write maybe just one example of how you think you've contributed to the profession. And again, it can be on a much smaller scale or a much larger scale. Okay, so we have things like sharing your 35 plus years of experience, which is great. Organizing an international conference, connecting people from over 50 countries, right, through EduCast. Listening to my colleagues' brainstorms, Zoom trainings, providing social media communities of practice for teachers and teachers educators. That's great. Part of many COP groups where I share, help, ask, and comment. That's great, Marwa. And sharing ideas in workshops and and school meetings. Yeah. So, I think a lot of us do that, even just as teachers, right? We contribute to our profession. And by contributing in that way, right, we're also educating others. And so we're already acting as teacher educators. So, and anything else? Oh, sorry, there's a few more. Training hundreds of novice and experienced teachers. That's great. Sharing the knowledge I attained from workshops with colleagues. Yes, definitely very important. Scaffolding new teachers to find their way to the profession through class visits and post-visit conferences. training at school, providing guidance and mentorship. Yeah, these are all great. So we already do contribute a lot to the profession. So we're definitely on the road to being teacher educators, and very effective ones at that. So let's go back to the confidence thermometer that we saw at the beginning of this presentation. So given what we've discussed, how confident do we feel now about how to be a more effective teacher educator? So if you could again write in the chat, green, yellow, or red, depending on what is written here. So if it's green, I still need a bit of help. Yellow, I feel more confident, or red, I feel very confident. So if you could take a minute to add that to the chat, green, yellow, or red. Okay, great. So I'm seeing just more yellow and red, so not as many, no more green. Okay, that's good. I'm glad. That's what we want. No more green. It's just, at least we have some tools. So, so I'd like to now, I don't know if we have enough time, Ron and Mohammed, but I was going to open it up for question and answers, and then give a little bit more information after that. So
I have to move you to another screen here first. Okay. Thank you, Alissa. That was very, very interesting. I would just like to add that no matter how many years we have been teaching as a teacher, that it's always good to come to something like this and just be reminded as a refresher of what we should be doing as teacher educators. So thank you very much for that. It's like a repeat, but I can never get enough. You can never hear it enough. And everybody who's in the audience today, I want to tell you, I'm 64 years old and I have to be reminded of this every year. Okay. So we do have to be reminded of it. So thank you for tackling that and walking us through that. I'd like to ask you a question. Maybe you have that link. I do know that Cambridge does have their CPD framework as a PDF. Would you happen to have that
yes,
to share that with us?
Yes, I do actually. It's right here.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
And
if you could just put that into the chat box.
Yeah, and actually this QR code will give everyone access to this presentation. So you'll be able to access that. So if you scan that, you'll have access. And I would love for us to sustain this engagement through connecting more. So please feel free to email me or to find me on Facebook. And actually, if you don't mind, if you could please just direct message me before so I know who you are, I would appreciate it. And but this is the link to the Continuing Professional Development Framework. And so let me just go quickly then over what that's offered in it. So here is the actual framework, Ron, which you're asking about, which is the PDF.
I use it so that I use it. So
okay,
I want everybody to have that because it's great. Right. It's just a great document. It's a great site to go to.
Right. And there's a lot of other tools here that you can use, as well as the CPD framework, but there's also the self-assessment tool and profile chart. There are webinars listed here. There's the newsletter, and that's how actually I found about this. I subscribe to the Teacher Educator newsletter. And there's also a certificate program if anyone is interested in that, as well as some of the things that we were talking about. They've actually divided it up. And so you can find articles, webinars, and publications that you can access if you're so interested. So I'll put this in the chat as well.
I took a screenshot, Alissa, if you don't mind, of the QR code with the thing.
Yes.
And I'm going to post that. Mo can post that. If you don't mind, we can post that on social media. Okay.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fine. So please, yes. And hopefully we can sustain the engagement as well. So